Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back. Today we're venturing into a really interesting discussion that was started by Øystein, the mind behind becoming a bookworm, a channel that I love to watch for the questions that it raises. And his video, Why Are All My Favorite Authors Men, really got me pausing for thought and considering, do I have literary gender preferences? And also, I pulled together a list in response to his call to action of please recommend narratives that are written by women that are uplifting. So I've got recommendations later in this video. Now, Øystein's leaning towards male authors is actually only 55% to 45% of female authors. But his conversation opens up a broader discussion about the themes that women tackle in their books, because he said from his observations that women writers lean towards heavier themes, saying that male authors write heavy themes that don't seem to probe personal vulnerabilities in quite the way that women writers do, a style which can feel more emotionally draining. So, do women write more depressing stories? I really wanted to unpick that today. How do personal and societal experiences shape the themes that dominate the books that we so cherish?
So it's first thing in the morning, no one's about, which usually always spooks me, but it's nice and bright. So one of the things that Øystein talked about in his video is that a lot of narratives by women writers focus on rape and abuse, and that proves his point, and that's true. So they are important themes, but that is the reason that I focused on Kim Ji-young, which is a more average experience for women, but nonetheless detrimental, and one that I hope changes over time, because we're looking at systemic gender issues that build up over time and are insidious. So I better check on the dog.
Reflecting on my life, I recognize moments that feel uniquely challenging for women, shaping a perspective that often seeps into books with heavier themes. Now, these layers of experience form the basis of several powerful stories, like Kim Ji-young, born 1982, a book that I actually purposely chose because I think it has a detached lens to underscore the systemic gender biases framing many women's realities. It does not go for the depressing jugular and pull us down in that way. The narrative instead is one of a clinician viewing their patient, Jiyoung, the main character. She has had realistic experiences that are unpleasant, and time again has been told to accept what happened because that's the lot of a woman, and now please move on. So things like a spy camera being discovered at work in the women's loos, being followed when walking home, experiencing a workplace that thinks her place after having a baby is at home, and much more. All of this is normalized as something that women just have happened to them. Let's think about whether male authors really do delve less deeply into personal vulnerabilities. And let's do so by broadening our lens beyond gender to consider culture too. That way, we can challenge ourselves to look beyond what is familiar to us. Until 2019, most of the books I had read were authored by Western writers, and then I got into translated literature and discovered the literary landscapes of South Korea, South America, the Philippines, and beyond, as authored by men and women I hadn't read before, including male authors such as Hwang Sok-young, David Diop, and Hiroki Takahashi, who navigate themes of trauma, grief, and resilience with a profound sense of personal vulnerability. In fact, Princess Bari by Hwang Sok-young is one of the books that made me feel hugely depressed midway through. And I was so glad I had someone to buddy read the book with, which was Dear from Novel Idea, because I don't think I would have finished that book if I wasn't reading it with someone else. So clearly, drawing on those experiences, depressing narratives that don't take a detached approach but are instead visceral in examining heavy themes, go beyond gender. Men do write these narratives. And for instance, South Korean literature authored by men or women is often marked by the country's tumultuous history of war, occupation, and the division of North from South. So those stories really embody collective and generational trauma and speak to readers of universal human experience with a rawness and intimacy that, yes, can often be really depressing. But let's turn back to Western literature, particularly Irish authors, because here we encounter a similar depth of emotional exploration. I think Irish male writers, with their stories steeped in rebellion, discrimination, and the scars of historical trauma, often delve into the horrors of physical violence and the betrayal by trusted parental figures or authorities, and evoke a profound emotional response in their readers. I picked those examples to really challenge our perception that most men are less likely than women to use a depressing narrative style that prods at our personal vulnerabilities. But I think it would be wrong for me not to point out that there are always going to be exceptions. And I love that. It suggests that while we're going around seeking a pattern, that there is always going to be an individual that thwarts us. There will be individual writers that confound our arguments. And in my case, it is Fuminori Nakamura, whose writing style fits in with Øystein's perception. Nakamura, a Japanese author, is known for his unflinching direct style and sparse or minimalist prose, which he uses to explore dark, psychological, complex narratives in a way that leaves the reader feeling somewhat detached from the heavy themes that he's describing, in a very similar way to the really morally ambiguous main characters that he creates that are so desensitized to the world that they inhabit. So, addressing heavy themes in literature, therefore, seems more about the approach an individual writer takes to exploring the complexities of the human condition than that writer's gender. I think trauma sells books. It seems to be profitable and marketable and driven by demand from us, readers.
So I'm back very, very briefly and very quickly on my smartphone camera to say that I had just finished recording, and then of course, as I pop onto YouTube, what do I see? I see Misery May Readathon, which is going to be hosted by Scott from Gunpowder Fiction Plot and Gemma from Gem of Books. I'm thinking, well, we've just talked about how there's a huge demand for sort of like traumatizing themes that's really driving what we see published. And while I concluded that I am looking forward to far more light-hearted, cozy fiction, it is in demand, and this proves my point.
Personally, like Øystein, I would like more light-hearted reads. And if you do too, you'll be happy about what seems to be a recent trend emerging in translated fiction and has been about in fantasy and mystery for a while, veering towards cozy fiction. Despite this shift, it seems only recently that publishers are more inclined to market books that offer a gentler, more comforting experience instead of leaving us emotionally shattered. I asked translator Shana Tan, who translated Welcome to the Hunamdong Bookshop, whether she was seeing this trend that I was noticing in Korean literature about cozy fiction becoming more available to us. And she agreed that the work that she and some of her fellow translators are getting to translate over the next 2 years is actually on the cozy side. So, given this context, it seems plausible that there are biases within the literary world affecting the visibility and success of certain types of writing and certain authors. Could it be that because of perceived demand, that women writers who write in a style that packs an emotional wallop have been more visible to us than those that write something light-hearted? I think so. But do let me know your thoughts. And consider the role of indie presses such as Persephone Books and Tilted Access Press, which strive to correct existing imbalances in the world of publishing. Now, Persephone Books focuses on resurrecting overlooked mid 20th century works by women, or mostly women, while Tilted Access Press aims to bring contemporary literature from the global majority to a broader audience. This is a huge topic in itself, and to find out more about fascinating indie publishers, I'll point you toward another of my favorite channels, Eyes on Indie. Now, Øystein reflected in his video that after about 3 years on BookTube, he noticed trends of writers who stand out on BookTube. Um, First year was Neil Gaiman, the second year Frederick Backman, and last year Haruki Murakami. And that got me thinking, well, how many women are published in comparison to men every year? And what is the backlist looking like? Because those are not new authors that we're describing there, those three men. So historically, women accounted for a mere 18% of books published in the 1960s within English speaking um, countries. And while specific data on the genres these women were published in is elusive, one might speculate that society did not encourage them to actually explore themes outside of what was traditionally expected. Perhaps lighter themes were overlooked in favor of narratives considered to be more literary worthy, which often revolves around challenging themes. Or perhaps they were confined to topics of domesticity. That might just be an assumption on my part, but let me know if it's a fair assumption. Fast forward to 2020, and for the first time, women authors represented just a smidge, over half of all books published in the English speaking world that year. Such a turnaround, and Cassie Werber highlighted in a March 2023 QZ.com article that this wasn't simply a shift from male to female authors. The publishing industry had actually expanded, with women's books increasing and selling more copies on average by 2021. Now, this shift signals a growing diversity as well in published narratives, accommodating a spectrum of emotional experiences. So let's respond to Becoming a Bookworm's call for recommendations of lighthearted books written by women writers. I'll recommend a selection that I think spans genres and themes. First up, we have The Year of Living Danishly by Helen Russell, a British author who documents her transition from London to Denmark, reflecting on the cultural differences, especially the Danish approach to happiness. And her narrative is filled with humorous anecdotes and insights into Danish societal norms that contrast sharply with her experiences in London. And it's a book that really showcased the warmth and community spirit that she encounters there, but does so in these really humorous stories. Then we have The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, aged 13 and three quarters by Sue Townsend, which captures the awkwardness and humor of adolescence through the eyes of Adrian Mole. Townsend's portrayal is poignant and comically relatable, making it a timeless exploration of young adulthood. Now, this one's probably controversial, but I'm adding it. Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs by Caitlin Doughty. Now, Caitlin is known for her Ask a Mortician YouTube channel and answers curious questions about death with her characteristic humor and expertise. Do I really consider this a happy narrative? Yes, for me. The book demystifies death, making the topic more approachable and less taboo. So that's on my list. Anyway, this one's more mainstream. Becoming by Michelle Obama. In this memoir, the former First Lady shares her journey, offering reflections and stories to inspire others on their own journeys to becoming their best versions of themselves. Then we have Getting Unstuck, Breaking Your Habitual Patterns and Encountering Naked Reality by Pema Chodron, using Buddhist principles. Again, does this sound like a light-hearted narrative? Actually, it is, because she blends really profound insights with accessible discussions, making it feel like you're talking to a friend or a mentor. She emphasizes the importance of self awareness, compassion, and overcoming personal obstacles through mindfulness and meditation, while she also highlights her many shortcomings despite years, decades of meditating and mindfulness. Anyway, Big Magic next, Creative Living Beyond Fear by Elizabeth Gilbert. Now, she shares insights on creativity, inspiration, and the courage to pursue a creative life. And it's a little bit controversial because there's one bit which talks about if you don't grab a creative idea and you just let it go, it's probably going to go to someone else who's a creative in your industry, that same idea, and they'll produce it. And that really, for a friend of mine, was something she didn't click with. She's like, seriously, I could think about this plot and I don't pursue it, and then someone else goes ahead and writes the same plot. And I was thinking, I can believe that. But I digress. Whether you are open to some out there ideas or not will determine how well you click with that one. I'm going to go into fantasy now and say some books mix action and humor, like the Parasol Protectorate series, blending steampunk comedy, mystery, and romance elements into an alternate Victorian England that is filled with vampires, werewolves, and ghosts. The protagonist, Alexia Tarabotti, has this unique ability to neutralize supernatural powers through touch. Her adventures in a society bound by strict etiquette and paranormal rules makes for a fun read. There are many, many more, of course, but I think that this list provides a snapshot and variety that showcases creativity, depth, and diversity in women's writing and ticks the box for narratives that are happier and much less bleak. Even the books that are addressing topics like death and personal growth do so with humor. I think we really discover a much more inclusive, richer literary world when we challenge our biases. So I love that Becoming a Bookworm said, I want to challenge this about my current reading pattern. And I think, to continue the discussion, would be a marvelous thing because there are so many more topics that relate to this. How stories can inspire, challenge, and connect us. Women writers have always had stories to tell about a range of topics, light or heavy. But in the past, I believe there were fewer books by women being published, and therefore the ones that got the recognition focused on heavier themes. But there could be more that sits behind it. And if you can think of something, perhaps you'd like to continue the conversation too. I believe that we're in an exciting phase with the publishing industry. Women are writing roughly half of the books being published now. More books are being translated, and it seems more of us are looking for light-hearted narratives. And where there is demand, there will be supply. As a community of readers, our joint exploration and willingness to pick up books that we don't usually do can break down barriers, challenge biases, and really inspire us to view the world through many lenses. I also now want to shout out C. Kevy running the Trans Girl April Readathon. Now, big thanks to Øystein for sharing his thought provoking video. I like that he really asks good questions of us fellow readers, and I'd love to hear from you too. So please drop your favorite feel good book recommendations, drop your thoughts about some of the assumptions that I've made, some of the statistics I've provided. I've linked the references in the video description. And thanks so much for watching. Take care.